Welcome students. I hope you are all doing well. Today we're going to discuss about an important poem which is included in your second term, and the poem is about Dover Beach by Mathew Arnold, who happens to be one of the famous writer of the Victorian age. Let us first look into his biography, who Mathew Arnold is, who was born in the year 1822 and died in the year 1888. As you see here on the screen, I will not have to explain and read out everything in detail, but I will just explain to you some of the important points from this paragraph out here. So, the first important thing about him is that he's a British poet and a critic who lived during the Victorian era, and much of his influence of his writing was from his childhood experience that he had spent in a village in the valley of the Thames. And during the 1860s, he acquired his reputation as a critic, and shortly after which he became a public figure. His major works during this time period included essays in criticism, culture and anarchy, and literature and dogma. He is also sometimes called the third great Victorian period, along with the famous poet like Alfred Lord Tennyson, then Robert Browning. Alright? So, following his time spent in the public spotlight, he had retired from school inspecting in 1886 and eventually died of a heart failure on April 15th, 1888. And today, as we read about him, one important thing that we need to know is that he is still remembered for his abilities not only as a poet and a critic as well. For the reason behind is he stimulated changes and inspired the world. Now, as we look into his writing, in the way of his writing, first we need to know his beliefs. What were his beliefs? Now, this is very interesting about him. Why? It is because he had an interesting relationship with religion, especially for he lived during the time of Victorian era. He was raised in a very liberal Anglican household, yet was heavily influenced by John Henry Newman, who was a very important figure in the church at the time. Although he had his own religious doubts, a source of great anxiety for him, he sought to capture the true essence of Christianity in many of his essays. As you can see, that his arguments for a renewed religion, faith, and an adoption in classical and ascetic morals were representative of the mainstream ideas of the Victorian era. Not only that, he supported a movement for spirituality itself, yet he himself had a difficulty at times believing it, for much of this is reflected in his works, such as the last essays on church and religion. Now, talking about his writings and his influences, what actually caused him to write in this manner is very important to know. For he lived during the time of Victorian age. Now, Victorian age had a very remarkable event in the history of the world, for it was the first time where the Industrial Revolution started. As you can see in this paragraph, there were political reforms, there were social changes, as also there were writings which actually evoked the faith of the people through the writings of Charles Darwin on the origin of species, as well as there was a railway boom and the introduction of the first telephone and telegraph. All right. So this particular period, which is from 1837 to 1901, had marked the reign of England's Queen Victoria. Now, this particular queen had reigned that age for a very long time. That is why it is termed as a Victorian age. And as you can see, it is given in the paragraph here itself. It also saw a demise of rural life as cities rapidly grew and expanded, long and regimented factory hours, and there was a start of the Crimean War and also Jack the Ripper, who was a famous murderer. Apart from this, there are also important things to be known about Queen Victoria, that she also became an Empress of India during the 1870s approximately. So as we move ahead to the poem, some of the key points that needs to be take note of it, that is that it is a dramatic monologue. Now I'm sure you are aware of the narrative of the writing where only one speaker speaks, so it is a dramatic monologue. And apart from this, it is a lyric poem which has an elegiac tone. It's a lament. You would find a lot of lamentation. The third point that you would find is there is a crisis of faith. Now, when we talk about the crisis of faith, it also reflects the faith and belief of the people which questioned their faith in religion because of lots of discoveries, lots of inventions that had taken place during the Victorian age, which actually resulted in the loss of faith in God and religion. And the fifth point that needs to be taken note is that it emphasizes on love. Now, this fourth and fifth point becomes the central idea of the poem, which is also the central theme of the poem, which is loss of religious faith and importance of love and loyalty. Now here we have the poem itself, and to make it clear and to make it clear and to make it simple for you to understand, I have also referred the meanings out here. I've given out short meanings out here, so as you look into the screen, I'm sure you would be able to take note of it, so please be serious about it. All right, so as I explain stanza wise, as I go through stanza wise, I would also be talking about the poetic techniques that is being used by Mathew Arnold in this poem. So first of all, in the first stanza, as you can see it on the screen, you may take a pause at the same time and write down the meanings on your textbook, so it'll be easy for you to understand the poem. The first image that you would find in the poem is the sea. You have the visual image out here. Then you have the visual image of tide, moon. All right, then you have an audio image of the grating roll. Okay, and from this particular line up to the last line of the first stanza, we find a poetic technique of enchantment. Now enchantment is a poetic technique where a sentence continues without a pause, all right, till the end of the line or stanza. Now let's go through the stanza. The opening stanza shows that the speaker is standing at a window describing the beauty of the seashore to his friend. The many critics says that it could be his beloved, it could be his companion. Now this is not sure. However, let us assume that it is somebody who is very close to him. Now the value of the scene is indicated by the use of adjectives as you find in the stanza: calm, full, fair, tranquil, sweet, and moon blanched. There is a complete sense of satisfaction about it. The first two lines constitute the antithesis in the poet's mind and his poetic extension. The sea is calm tonight, the tide is full. All right. It is not possible for the sea to remain calm and composed on a full moon day, just like the non-validity of temporal existence between the worldly doubts and spiritual faith. The white moonlight falls upon the Strait of Dover, which connects the English Channel to the North Sea. The cliffs and mountains of English shore is seen to be reflecting the moonlight, whereas the French coast was not steady as it was gleaming for some time and then gone. The very phrase that we find here, moon blanched land, you may refer to the meaning as well, suggests the balance, stability, and serenity which Arnold desires for himself. Arnold is of the opinion that England is endowed with all its geographical and cultural beauty that any other nation aspires for. And as we look into this particular line, we find that the poet suddenly switches from this visual imagery to audio imagery, for he invokes the readers to listen to the grating roars of the lashing waves against the pebbles. He describes here the continuous process of fusion of land and sea. It is through these lines the poet wants the fusion of faith with mankind. Alright? So, this is the explanation of the first stanza. The second stanza, as we find here, we find Sophocles. Now, Sophocles here is referred to the famous Greek tragedy writer. Aegon here is one of the name of the Greek island. Then turbid ebb and flow, as you see here, is a metaphor which has been compared to human misery, to the ebb and flow of the sea. Alright, so the second stanza, the opening lines, serves as a link between the past and the present. Now you would find here a tone of melancholy which pervades the entire stanza. Okay, it is in this line that the poet laments that the eternal note of human misery is discernible to him, as long ago in the classical age it was to Sophocles. Some sort of like a similar kind of sound that Sophocles must have heard long time back, many years back. The Greek tragedy writer who heard the eternal note of sadness when he sat by the Aegean Sea, and this sound itself brought to his mind the endless suffering of man. So the poet likens the human sufferings to the ceaseless motion of the sea. He too here laments at present and mourns the loss of faith in the Victorian age. It is in this realm of temporal space and time that the clash between faith and doubt is serving no purpose to the human race. Now, in the third stanza, as you see, we find simile as well as a metaphor. Now here the sea of faith. Now the sea of faith is a metaphor which talks about faith, which is compared to the vast eternal sea. Okay, and this particular line, lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled, is also is a simile out here, where faith is compared to a girdle which encircles the shore of the earth, which a girdle which encircles the waist. In the same way, the faith is also and faith is here a simile of sea which encircles the shore of the earth. All right, then the last line out here, shingles, talks about, which is a symbol of the harsh reality. As you see the meaning, you would find shingles talks about rounded pebbles, all right, which is a symbol of the harsh reality. Now this particular stanza, these very lines of this stanza is indicative of pessimism or negativity, which has encompassed and engulfed the once so great a nation, which was once a great nation. Ironically, this pessimism has become an attribute of the entire mankind. The faith that mankind once had in Christianity and religion is compared to a sea here. The sea of faith once used to be the lifeline of the people, shielding them from fears and doubts. However, today it has receded. Alright? Now, the intellectual outlook of the age has overpowered romantic sensibilities in human beings. So the naked shingle that is mentioned here of the world is a testimony to it. Darwinism, as I've talked earlier, in Arnold's 19th century England, brought science into full conflict with religion. Science challenged faith and religion, and so that is why people found religious faith hard to accept when they were being bombarded with scientific facts proclaiming that there is no God, no need for religion. It means that literally that when faith pulls away, it leaves only sadness and despair. But the last stanza of this poem talks about love, which is the one of the important theme of the poem. And here we would find the world which seems, the poetic technique, the world which seems is a simile here. The world which is compared to the world of dreams, all right? And this line, to lie before us like a land of dreams, is an alliteration. The subsequent lines, so various, so beautiful, so new, up to the line, nor certitude, nor peace, nor health for pain. Now this is a poetic technique of Anaphora. Now Anaphora is actually repetition of an expression at the beginning of successive phrases, sometimes clauses, sentences, or verses for poetic effect. All right, so here we go ahead with the third stanza. So this particular stanza carries a note of hope. Now it is also blended with the symbol of despair and hopelessness. The poet here urges the world to be true to one another and love each other. Perhaps these are the only two ways of social behavior, which is the only means of survival in this faithless world. He says that the world is an illusion, a world, a mere shadow. Indeed, he himself is also disillusioned, at the same time disenchanted with the world, because there seemed to be no certitude, there seemed to be no peace, no help, no compassion in this world. So the world has become bereft of human values. It is because of this reason that Arnold uses this imagery of the battlefield out here. As we see here, battlefield of in the dark night. All right, where soldiers are slaying each other incessantly without a proper look on one another. Actually, he conveys that how the people of this world have gone completely ignorant of the eternal light of knowledge and compassion and are fighting and confronting each other. So faith and humanity is forgotten, and the present is filled with despair and hopelessness. This is what he emphasizes on. And so to keep them together and united, the only thing that can give them hope is to have love and to be true to one another. Otherwise, the world would become a darkling plain where everybody would be swept with confused alarms. That is what it is mentioned in the third stanza. The soldiers would be fighting against each other without even knowing against whom they are fighting. So this is the poem about Dover Beach, written by Mathew Arnold. So I have also given a short note on this particular poem. You may refer to the school website. I hope you have understood in a very simple way. Thank you for watching the video. Have a good day.